The desert heat shimmered across the tarmac at Forward Operating Base Thunder, where Staff Sergeant Maria Santos wiped sweat from her brow as she approached the massive Apache helicopter. The sun beat down mercilessly on the military installation, but Maria had grown accustomed to the harsh conditions during her 18 months stationed in this remote corner of the Middle East. Maria had always been different from her peers. While other soldiers dreamed of combat roles or desk jobs back home, she found her calling in the precise, methodical work of aircraft maintenance. Every bolt, every wire, every fuel line had to be perfect. One mistake could mean the difference between life and death for the pilots who trusted their lives to her work. The Apache AH-64 was a beast of a machine, bristling with weapons and advanced electronics. Today's aircraft, tail number 045287, was scheduled for a routine patrol mission along the border. Maria had performed the same refueling procedure hundreds of times, but she never allowed herself to become complacent. Each time was treated with the same level of attention and care as her first. As she connected the fuel hose to the helicopter's tank, Maria's mind wandered to the letter she had received from her younger sister back in Texas. Carmen was graduating from high school next month, and Maria wished desperately that she could be there. The military life required sacrifices, and missing family milestones was one of the hardest parts of her service. The fuel gauge climbed steadily as gallons of JP-8 jet fuel flowed into the Apache's tanks. Maria performed her routine checks, ensuring all seals were tight and no fuel was leaking onto the hot concrete below. The smell of aviation fuel mixed with the desert dust created a familiar scent that had become associated with her daily routine. Captain Jake Morrison, the lead pilot, was known throughout the base for his meticulous attention to detail. At 32, he had already completed 3 tours of duty and had earned a reputation as one of the most skilled Apache pilots in the squadron. His co-pilot, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, was newer to the unit but had quickly proven herself as a capable and reliable officer. Maria had serviced their aircraft many times before, and they always treated her with respect and professionalism. Unlike some pilots who barely acknowledged the ground crew, Morrison and Chen understood that their lives depended on the expertise of people like Maria. They made it a point to thank her personally after each mission. As Maria continued her work, she hummed quietly to herself. It was an old song her grandmother used to sing, a Mexican lullaby that brought her comfort during difficult times. The melody helped her focus and provided a sense of connection to home, even in this foreign land thousands of miles away. The base around them buzzed with activity. Other helicopters were being prepared for missions. Transport vehicles moved supplies across the compound, and soldiers went about their daily duties. The constant noise of generators, air conditioning units, and radio chatter created a symphony of military life that had become background music to Maria's existence. She checked her watch and noted that she was making good time. The refueling process would be complete in another 10 minutes, giving Morrison and Chen plenty of time to complete their pre-flight checks before their scheduled departure. Maria prided herself on efficiency and had developed a system that allowed her to work quickly without sacrificing safety or thoroughness. The sun was beginning its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Evening missions were common, taking advantage of cooler temperatures and the tactical advantages that darkness could provide. Maria had learned not to think too much about what the pilots encountered during their flights. Her job was to ensure they had the best possible equipment to complete their mission safely. As she worked, Maria reflected on her journey to this point. Growing up in a small town outside San Antonio, she had never imagined herself working on military aircraft in a combat zone. Her path to the military had been unconventional, driven more by economic necessity than patriotic fervor. The Army had offered her training, steady pay, and a chance to learn valuable skills that could translate to civilian careers later. The technical training had been challenging, but rewarding. Maria discovered she had a natural aptitude for understanding complex mechanical systems. Her instructors had been impressed with her ability to diagnose problems quickly and her attention to detail when performing maintenance procedures. These skills had made her one of the most trusted mechanics in her unit. The fuel flow slowed to a trickle, indicating that the tanks were nearly full. Maria began preparing to disconnect the hose and complete her final checks. She moved with practiced efficiency, each motion deliberate and precise. Years of training and experience had honed her abilities to the point where these procedures had become second nature. The Apache's engines remained silent for now, but soon they would roar to life with tremendous power. Maria always felt a sense of satisfaction when she watched aircraft she had serviced take off successfully. It was tangible proof that her work mattered, and that she was contributing to something larger than herself. As she finished the refueling process and began coiling the fuel hose, Maria noticed Morrison approaching the aircraft. He was carrying his flight gear and had the focused expression that pilots wore when preparing for a mission. Chen followed close behind, reviewing what appeared to be mission briefing notes. The routine was familiar and comforting in its predictability. Soon, Maria would complete her post-refueling inspection. Morrison and Chen would conduct their pre-flight checks, and another mission would begin. It was just another day in the life of Forward Operating Base Thunder, where dedicated professionals worked together to accomplish their mission in one of the world's most challenging environments. Maria had no way of knowing that this particular evening would be different from all the others, or that a single patch on her uniform would set in motion a series of events that would change everything she thought she knew about her service, her mission, and herself. Captain Morrison walked around the Apache, conducting his standard visual inspection of the aircraft. His trained eyes scanned every surface, looking for anything that might indicate a potential problem. The rotor blades, landing gear, weapons, systems, and external sensors all received careful scrutiny. This ritual had saved his life on more than one occasion, when he had spotted issues that might have been missed during routine maintenance. As he approached the fuel port area where Maria was completing her work, Morrison noticed something that made him pause mid-step. On Maria's left shoulder, partially obscured by the fuel hose she was manipulating, was a unit patch that he had never seen before. The design was distinctive, a black eagle with spread wings against a dark blue background, surrounded by stars arranged in a specific pattern. Morrison's blood ran cold. He recognized that patch from classified briefings he had received during his last rotation stateside. It was associated with a highly classified special operations unit that officially didn't exist. Personnel assigned to such units were typically involved in activities far beyond the scope of normal military operations, and their presence at a standard forward operating base raised serious questions. The captain forced himself to continue his inspection without showing any outward signs of concern, but his mind was racing. Why would someone with that level of clearance be working as a routine aircraft mechanic at Forward Operating Base Thunder? The assignment made no sense unless there was something happening at this base that he wasn't aware of. Maria finished securing the fuel hose and began her final inspection checklist. She was completely unaware that her patch had been noticed, or that it meant anything significant to anyone at the base. The patch had been sewn onto her uniform months ago, and she had grown so accustomed to wearing it that she no longer thought about its presence. Morrison tried to appear casual as he continued his pre-flight inspection, but he found himself stealing glances at Maria as she worked. Everything about her seemed normal. Her movements were efficient and professional. Her attention to detail was evident, and she displayed the same level of competence he had observed during their previous interactions. Yet the presence of that patch changed everything about how he perceived her role at the base. Lieutenant Chen approached the aircraft carrying her flight helmet and kneeboard. She greeted Maria with a friendly nod and began her own pre-flight preparations. Chen was focused on reviewing the mission parameters and didn't notice Morrison's distraction or the patch that had captured his attention. The mission briefing had been routine, a standard reconnaissance patrol along a section of the border, where intelligence reports suggested increased smuggling activity. They were to observe and report, avoiding engagement unless absolutely necessary. It was the type of mission Morrison had flown dozens of times, but now he wondered if there was more to it than he had been told. Maria completed her inspection and gave Morrison a thumbs up, indicating that the aircraft was ready for flight. She began gathering her equipment and preparing to clear the area so the pilots could start their engines. As she moved around the helicopter, the patch remained visible on her shoulder, a silent reminder of secrets that Morrison was not supposed to know existed. The captain's training kicked in, and he forced himself to focus on the immediate task at hand. Whatever questions he had about Maria's true role would have to wait until after the mission was complete. Flying a combat helicopter required absolute concentration, and allowing himself to become distracted could have fatal consequences for both him and Chen. As Maria walked away from the aircraft, Morrison caught Chen's attention and pointed toward his watch, indicating it was time to begin their startup procedures. Chen nodded and climbed into the co-pilot's seat, completely unaware of the tension that had developed in her aircraft commander. The Apache's engines began their characteristic whine as Morrison initiated the startup sequence. The sound grew to a roar as the twin turboshaft engines reached operating temperature and the main rotor began to turn. The familiar vibrations of the helicopter coming to life provided a momentary distraction from Morrison's concerns about what he had discovered. Maria stood at a safe distance watching as the Apache prepared for departure. This was always her favorite part of the process, seeing the aircraft she had serviced successfully transition from a static machine to a living, breathing weapon system. The sight never failed to give her a sense of pride and accomplishment. Morrison ran through his checklist methodically, but part of his attention remained focused on Maria's position near the flight line. He found himself studying her posture and movements, looking for any signs that might reveal her true purpose at the base. Everything about her appeared completely normal, which only made the situation more puzzling. The control tower cleared them for departure, and Morrison lifted the Apache into the desert air. As they climbed and turned toward their patrol sector, he caught one last glimpse of Maria below, already moving toward the next aircraft that required her attention. From the air, she looked exactly like what she appeared to be, a dedicated aircraft mechanic doing her job with professional competence. Chen was busy with navigation and communication tasks, leaving Morrison alone with his thoughts as they flew toward their assigned patrol area. The landscape below was a monotonous expanse of sand and rock, broken occasionally by roads, villages, and the green strips that marked irrigation canals. The implications of what he had observed continued to trouble Morrison as they settled into their patrol pattern. Special operations units didn't assign personnel to routine maintenance roles without a specific purpose. If Maria was indeed a member of such a unit, her presence at Forward Operating Base Thunder suggested that something significant was happening or about to happen. Morrison considered his options. He could report what he had observed through official channels, but doing so might compromise an ongoing operation or put Maria at risk if her cover was meant to be maintained. He could confront Maria directly, but that approach carried its own risks and might violate security protocols he wasn't aware of. The radio crackled with routine traffic from other aircraft and ground units, providing a soundtrack to Morrison's internal debate. Chen occasionally pointed out features on the ground that matched their briefing materials, but nothing they observed suggested any unusual activity in their patrol sector. As the mission continued, Morrison found himself paying closer attention to the radio transmissions from their base. He listened for any coded communications or unusual activity that might provide clues about Maria's true role. The routine nature of all transmissions only deepened the mystery surrounding her presence and the significance of the patch he had observed. The sun continued its descent toward the horizon, and Morrison knew they would soon receive instructions to return to base. The routine mission was proceeding exactly as planned, but he was no longer certain that anything about Forward Operating Base Thunder was as routine as it appeared to be. The return flight to Forward Operating Base Thunder was completed in relative silence, with Chen handling most of the radio communications, while Morrison remained lost in thought. The familiar landmarks that marked their approach to the base appeared in the gathering dusk, but Morrison found himself viewing everything with new eyes, wondering what secrets might be hidden beneath the surface of routine military operations. As they touched down on the designated landing pad, Morrison's attention immediately turned toward the maintenance area where Maria would be waiting to service their aircraft after the mission. The standard post-flight procedures required her to check fluid levels, inspect for any damage that might have occurred during the flight, and ensure the helicopter was ready for its next assignment. Chen began shutting down the aircraft systems according to the established checklist, but Morrison found himself watching Maria approach their helicopter with renewed intensity. Everything about her demeanor appeared completely normal. She moved with the same confident efficiency he had observed hundreds of times before, carrying the same equipment and wearing the same professional expression. Maria plugged in the ground power unit and began her post-flight inspection routine. She checked the engine compartments for leaks, examined the rotor head for signs of wear or damage, and tested various systems to ensure they were functioning properly. Her movements were practiced and methodical, showing no indication that she was aware of Morrison's scrutiny or that she was anything other than what she appeared to be. Morrison completed his own post-flight checklist and climbed down from the cockpit, but instead of heading directly to the operations center for debriefing as he normally would, he lingered near the aircraft. Chen noticed his unusual behavior and asked if everything was all right, but Morrison deflected her concern with a casual comment about wanting to discuss a minor system issue with the maintenance crew. The patch on Maria's shoulder remained clearly visible as she worked, and Morrison found himself studying its details more carefully. The Black Eagle design was intricate, with small details that suggested it was not a standard military insignia available through normal supply channels. The arrangement of stars around the Eagle's perimeter followed a pattern that Morrison recognized from his classified briefings. Confirming his initial identification, Maria completed her inspection and approached Morrison with her standard post-flight report. She mentioned that she had noticed a slight hydraulic fluid leak that required attention, but assured him that it was minor and would be repaired before the next scheduled flight. Her voice was calm and professional, showing no signs of nervousness or awareness that anything was amiss. Morrison thanked her for the information and asked a few routine questions about the repair timeline, but he was actually studying her responses for any subtle cues that might reveal her true purpose. Maria answered his questions directly and completely, providing exactly the type of information he would expect from a competent aircraft mechanic. As Maria turned to leave, Morrison made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. Instead of allowing her to walk away as he had done countless times before, he called her name and asked if he could speak with her privately. The request was unusual enough to cause Maria to pause and give him a questioning look, but she agreed without hesitation. Morrison led her to a quiet area behind one of the maintenance hangars, away from the bustle of normal base activities. The location provided privacy while remaining within the bounds of appropriate military protocol. Maria followed without question, but Morrison could sense that she was beginning to wonder about the purpose of this unexpected conversation. The captain struggled with how to begin the conversation. Direct confrontation about classified information could have serious consequences if he was wrong about Maria's true role, but continuing to pretend ignorance felt like a betrayal of his responsibilities as an officer. The weight of command decisions had never felt heavier than it did in that moment. Maria waited patiently for Morrison to speak, her expression showing polite attention, but no signs of anxiety or concern. If she was indeed involved in classified operations, she was either an exceptional actress or genuinely unaware that her cover had been compromised. Morrison found himself hoping for the latter possibility, as it would make the conversation much less complicated. The base around them continued its normal evening routine. Other aircraft were landing and taking off. Supply vehicles moved between buildings, and soldiers went about their duties without any awareness of the drama unfolding in the shadows behind the maintenance hangar. The ordinary nature of the surroundings made Morrison's concerns seem almost surreal. Morrison finally decided on an indirect approach. He began by complimenting Maria on her consistent professionalism and attention to detail, noting that pilots appreciated working with maintenance personnel they could trust completely. Maria thanked him for the recognition, but Morrison could see that she was still puzzled about why this conversation required privacy. The captain then shifted the conversation toward more general topics about military service and career paths. He asked Maria about her background and training, hoping to uncover information that might explain the presence of the classified patch without directly confronting her about it. Maria responded with the same straightforward manner she had always displayed, describing her path from civilian life to military service. As Maria spoke about her training and assignments, Morrison listened carefully for any inconsistencies or gaps that might reveal hidden aspects of her service record. Her story seemed completely plausible and matched the background of a typical aircraft mechanic, but Morrison had learned that the most effective covers were built on foundations of truth, with only the most sensitive details altered or omitted. The conversation continued for several minutes, with Morrison probing gently and Maria responding openly to his questions. Neither of them mentioned the patch that had started this entire sequence of events, but Morrison was acutely aware of its presence on Maria's shoulder throughout their discussion. As the evening air began to cool and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Morrison realized that he was no closer to understanding Maria's true role than he had been when the conversation began. She had answered all of his questions, completely and honestly, but nothing in her responses had explained the presence of a patch associated with one of the military's most classified special operations units. Morrison was faced with a decision that could affect both of their careers and potentially compromise ongoing operations. He could continue to investigate Maria's background through official channels, confront her directly about the patch, or simply pretend he had never noticed it, and return to the status quo that had existed before his observation. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on Morrison's shoulders as he considered his options. Whatever choice he made in the next few minutes would set in motion a chain of events that neither he nor Maria could predict or control. Morrison took a deep breath and made his decision. The uncertainty was eating at him, and he knew that pretending he hadn't seen the patch would haunt him for the remainder of his deployment. Military officers were trained to confront difficult situations directly, and this moment called for exactly that kind of courage. "Maria," he said quietly, "I need to ask you about something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." His voice carried the authority of command, but also a note of genuine concern that made Maria straighten her posture slightly. Maria's expression grew more serious as she sensed the shift in Morrison's tone. "Of course, Captain. What do you need to know?" Her response was immediate and direct, showing no signs of evasion or nervousness that might indicate she had something to hide. Morrison gestured toward her left shoulder, where the patch was clearly visible in the fading daylight. "That unit patch you're wearing, it's not standard issue for aircraft maintenance personnel. In fact, it's associated with operations that most people at this base don't have clearance to know about." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Morrison watched Maria's face carefully, looking for any reaction that might reveal the truth about her situation. What he saw surprised him. Instead of the defensive posture or careful denial he might have expected, Maria's expression showed genuine confusion and concern. "I'm not sure what you mean, Captain," Maria replied, glancing down at her shoulder as if seeing the patch for the first time in months. "This was issued to me along with the rest of my uniform when I was assigned to this base. I assumed it was standard for all personnel stationed here." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine as the implications of Maria's response began to sink in. If she was telling the truth about receiving the patch through normal channels, it suggested that someone at Forward Operating Base Thunder had access to classified special operations insignia and was distributing them to personnel who weren't supposed to have them. "Who exactly issued this patch to you?" Morrison asked, his voice taking on the tone he used during mission briefings when precise information was critical. "I need you to think carefully about this, Maria. The details could be very important." Maria's brow furrowed as she concentrated on remembering the specifics of her uniform issue process. "It was during in-processing when I first arrived at the base. Master Sergeant Williams was handling new arrivals that week. He gave me a full set of uniforms with all the standard patches attached. I just assumed everything was regulation." The mention of Master Sergeant Williams sent another wave of concern through Morrison. Williams was the senior non-commissioned officer responsible for personnel administration at the base, which meant he had access to sensitive information about unit assignments and clearances. If Williams was involved in distributing classified patches, the implications could be far-reaching. Morrison realized that what he had initially thought might be a simple case of misidentified insignia was potentially something much more serious. The possibility that classified materials were being mishandled at Forward Operating Base Thunder raised questions about operational security and the integrity of their entire mission. "Maria, I need you to understand that this situation could be serious," Morrison said, his voice reflecting the gravity of his concerns. "That patch is associated with classified special operations units. Regular personnel aren't supposed to have access to those insignia, and wearing one without proper authorization could be considered a security violation." The color drained from Maria's face as the implications of Morrison's words became clear. She had always been careful to follow regulations and had never intentionally done anything that might compromise security or her military career. The idea that she might have unknowingly violated classified protocols was deeply troubling. "Captain, I swear I had no idea," Maria said, her voice reflecting genuine distress. "I've never seen any classified materials or been involved in special operations. I'm just an aircraft mechanic doing my job the best way I know how. If there's a problem with my uniform, I'll fix it immediately." Morrison believed her. Everything about Maria's reaction suggested that she was an unwitting participant in whatever was happening, rather than a willing conspirator. Her distress appeared genuine, and her immediate offer to correct the situation was consistent with the professional behavior he had observed throughout their working relationship. The captain found himself facing a new dilemma. If Maria was innocent, then someone else at the base was responsible for the security breach. Reporting the situation through official channels might protect Morrison from any accusations of failing to report a security violation, but it could also destroy Maria's career and potentially compromise an ongoing investigation, if one was already in progress. "Maria, I want you to listen to me very carefully," Morrison said, stepping closer to ensure their conversation remained private. "For now, I don't want you to mention this conversation to anyone else. Don't change anything about your routine or your uniform. Act exactly as you normally would." Maria nodded, though Morrison could see that she was struggling to process the situation. The idea that her routine assignment might be connected to classified operations was completely outside her previous experience and training. Morrison continued, "I'm going to look into this situation through appropriate channels, but I need some time to determine the best way to proceed. Can you give me 24 hours before you take any action regarding the patch?" "Yes, sir," Maria replied, her military training taking over despite her obvious confusion and concern. "But Captain, if I've done something wrong, I want to make it right. I never intended to violate any regulations or compromise security." Morrison felt a surge of respect for Maria's character, even in a situation that could potentially end her military career. Her primary concern was doing the right thing, rather than protecting herself. It was exactly the kind of integrity that the military tried to instill in all its personnel. "I believe you, Maria," Morrison said. "That's why I'm going to help you figure out what's really happening here. But until we know more, the safest course of action is to maintain the status quo while I investigate." As they prepared to return to their normal duties, Morrison realized that he had moved far beyond his original concerns about Maria's true role. The situation had evolved into something that could potentially affect the entire base and possibly expose serious security. Breaches that went far beyond one misplaced patch. The weight of command had never felt heavier as Morrison considered his next steps. Whatever was happening at Forward Operating Base Thunder, he was now committed to uncovering the truth. Regardless of where that investigation might lead or whose careers it might ultimately affect, Maria walked back toward the maintenance area with her mind racing, while Morrison headed toward the operations center with a growing sense that nothing at Forward Operating Base Thunder was quite what it seemed to be. Morrison spent most of the night researching personnel records and security protocols on his computer terminal in the operations center. The base had grown quiet except for the essential personnel maintaining watch duties, giving him the privacy he needed to investigate without drawing unwanted attention to his activities. His first step was to review Master Sergeant Williams's service record and current duties. Williams had been at Forward Operating Base Thunder for nearly 2 years and had an exemplary record of service spanning 15 years in the Army. His responsibilities included personnel administration, security clearances, and supply coordination, all positions that would give him access to sensitive information and materials. Morrison then searched for any official records regarding the distribution of unit patches and insignia. Military regulations were very specific about which patches could be worn by which personnel, and there should have been clear documentation for any special authorizations. His search revealed no records of approved exceptions for classified special operations patches at their base. The more Morrison dug into the administrative records, the more concerned he became. There were subtle inconsistencies in supply orders and personnel assignments that individually seemed insignificant, but together suggested a pattern of activities that didn't match the base's official mission profile. As dawn approached, Morrison made a decision to approach the situation from a different angle. Instead of continuing to investigate through computer records, He decided to observe Williams directly during normal duty hours. If the master sergeant was involved in unauthorized activities, careful observation might reveal behavioral patterns or contacts that would provide additional evidence. Morrison arrived at the base administrative offices early, timing his visit to coincide with Williams' normal arrival time. He fabricated a routine question about flight scheduling as a pretext for the visit, allowing him to observe the master sergeant's demeanor and workspace without arousing suspicion. Williams appeared completely normal during their brief interaction. He answered Morrison's questions professionally and showed no signs of nervousness or unusual behavior. His office was organized according to standard military protocols, and nothing in his immediate environment suggested any involvement in irregular activities. After leaving the administrative offices, Morrison realized that his direct observation approach might be insufficient to uncover whatever was happening. If Williams was involved in classified activities, he would likely be trained to maintain normal appearances during routine interactions. Morrison decided that he needed to approach the situation more systematically. He began developing a plan to document patterns of behavior and activities at the base that might reveal the true purpose behind Maria's patch and any other security irregularities that might exist. Meanwhile, Maria was struggling to maintain her normal routine while processing the implications of her conversation with Morrison. Every interaction with other personnel made her wonder whether they knew something about her situation that she didn't understand. The patch on her shoulder, which she had worn without thought for months, now felt like a beacon drawing unwanted attention. During her morning maintenance rounds, Maria found herself paying closer attention to the patches worn by other personnel. She noticed that while most wore standard unit insignia appropriate for their roles, there were several individuals whose patches seemed inconsistent with their apparent duties. The observation made her wonder whether she was part of a larger pattern that she had been too focused on her work to notice. Maria's anxiety grew throughout the morning as she considered the possibility that she might be unknowingly involved in activities that could end her military career. She had worked too hard to earn her position and had too much respect for military service to willingly participate in anything that might compromise security or integrity. By midday, Morrison had developed a preliminary plan for investigating the situation more thoroughly. He would need to carefully document his observations while maintaining operational security and avoiding any actions that might interfere with legitimate classified activities if they were indeed taking place at the base. Morrison's first step was to create a secure record of everything he had observed and learned. He documented the details of Maria's patch, the timing of their conversation, and the results of his initial research into administrative records. The documentation would protect both him and Maria if the situation required formal investigation. The captain then began a systematic review of personnel assignments and duty rotations at the base. He was looking for patterns that might indicate which personnel were involved in activities beyond their apparent roles and whether there was a coordinated effort to maintain cover identities for classified operations. Morrison's investigation was interrupted by a routine mission briefing that required his immediate attention. As he sat through the standard operational overview, he found himself viewing every aspect of base activities through the lens of his growing suspicions about hidden agendas and classified operations. The mission briefing covered the same types of patrol and reconnaissance activities that had been routine for months. But Morrison now wondered whether these standard operations might be providing cover for other activities. The possibility that his own flights might be supporting classified missions without his knowledge was deeply troubling. After the briefing, Morrison returned to his investigation with renewed urgency. He realized that if classified operations were indeed taking place at the base, he needed to determine whether he was supposed to be aware of them or whether their concealment from him indicated potential security violations. Morrison's research revealed that forward operating Base Thunder had been selected for its isolated location and robust communications infrastructure. These characteristics made it suitable for supporting various types of classified activities while maintaining the appearance of routine military operations. As the day progressed, Morrison began to suspect that the situation was more complex than a simple administrative error regarding Maria's patch. The patterns he was discovering suggested a coordinated effort to maintain operational security for activities that went beyond the base's official mission, the captain realized that he was approaching a point where he would need to make a decision about whether to report his observations through official channels or continue his independent investigation. Either choice carried significant risks for both his career and his personal integrity. Morrison's training as a military officer emphasized the importance of following proper procedures and respecting the chain of command, but his growing suspicions made him question whether normal channels could be trusted in this situation. The possibility that classified operations were being conducted without his knowledge raised questions about who at the base could be trusted with sensitive information. As evening approached, Morrison prepared to continue his investigation while maintaining his normal duties and responsibilities. He knew that the next 24 hours would be crucial in determining the true nature of the situation and deciding on the appropriate course of action. The weight of command decisions had never felt more personal as Morrison considered the impact his choices might have on Maria's career and the operational security of whatever activities were taking place at Forward Operating Base Thunder. Morrison's investigation reached a critical turning point when he discovered a series of encrypted communications logs buried deep in the base's communication archives. The logs showed regular contact with agencies and units that weren't supposed to have any connection to Forward Operating Base Thunder's official mission. The frequency and timing of these communications suggested ongoing coordination rather than occasional consultation. The captain cross-referenced the communication logs with personnel duty schedules and discovered that many of the encrypted transmissions occurred during Master Sergeant Williams' duty shifts. The correlation was too consistent to be coincidental, indicating that Williams was likely aware of or directly involved in whatever classified activities were taking place at the base. Morrison realized that his investigation had uncovered evidence of a significant compartmentalized operation. The patches, personnel assignments, and communication patterns all pointed to Forward Operating Base Thunder, serving as a cover for special operations that were deliberately concealed from most of the base's personnel, including senior officers like himself. The discovery forced Morrison to confront an uncomfortable truth about military operations in the modern era. Not every officer was briefed on every mission, and compartmentalized security meant that even base commanders might be unaware of all activities taking place under their nominal authority. The system was designed to protect operational security, but it could leave conscientious officers in impossible situations when they discovered evidence of activities they weren't supposed to know about. Morrison's training emphasized the importance of operational security and following proper procedures, but those same principles now created a dilemma about how to proceed. Reporting his discoveries through normal channels might compromise legitimate classified operations, but failing to report potential security violations could be considered dereliction of duty. As Morrison wrestled with his options, Maria was facing her own crisis of confidence. The uncertainty about her situation was affecting her ability to concentrate on her duties, and she found herself making small errors that she would normally never commit. Her growing anxiety was becoming noticeable to her supervisors and co-workers. Maria decided that she couldn't continue working under the cloud of uncertainty that surrounded her patch and its implications. Despite Morrison's request to wait 24 hours before taking action, she felt compelled to seek clarification about her situation through official channels. Her military training emphasized the importance of addressing potential problems promptly, rather than allowing them to escalate. Maria approached Master Sergeant Williams during his afternoon duty shift and requested a private meeting to discuss her uniform and patch assignments. Williams agreed to the meeting without hesitation, showing no signs of concern or unusual interest in her request. During their conversation, Maria explained that she had questions about the unit patch she had been issued and wanted to ensure that she was wearing appropriate insignia for her role at the base. Williams listened to her concerns without interruption, maintaining the same professional demeanor that characterized all of his interactions with base personnel. Williams' response surprised Maria with its directness and clarity. He explained that the patch she was wearing was indeed associated with classified special operations, and that her assignment to wear it was part of a compartmentalized security program designed to protect ongoing operations at the base. The Master Sergeant revealed that Maria had been selected for participation in the program based on her exemplary service record, technical expertise, and security clearance level. Her role was to maintain normal aircraft maintenance duties while also providing covert support for special operations. Aircraft that periodically used the base for refueling and technical support. Williams explained that the Special Operations Patch served multiple purposes within the compartmentalized security structure. It identified her to Special Operations personnel as someone cleared for certain levels of classified information, while simultaneously providing cover by making her appear to be a regular member of a classified unit rather than a support person with limited access. Maria learned that her routine maintenance work on aircraft like Morrison's Apache was legitimate, but she had also been unknowingly providing services for special operations aircraft during night shifts and off-duty hours. Her participation in these activities had been managed through careful scheduling and memory conditioning techniques designed to maintain operational security. The revelation that her memory had been partially altered to maintain security was initially disturbing to Maria, but Williams assured her that the conditioning was reversible and that her participation in the program had been voluntary, even though she couldn't consciously remember agreeing to it. Williams offered to restore Maria's full memories of her involvement in the special operations support activities, explaining that the security situation had evolved to the point where her complete awareness was now necessary for mission success. Maria agreed to the memory restoration process, understanding that it would fundamentally change her understanding of her role at the base. Meanwhile, Morrison's investigation had led him to the same conclusions that Williams was explaining to Maria. His analysis of communication logs, personnel records, and operational patterns had revealed the existence of a sophisticated, compartmentalized operation that used forward operating base Thunder as cover for special operations activities. Morrison realized that his discovery of Maria's patch had been the first thread in unraveling a complex security structure that had been operating successfully for months. His careful investigation had inadvertently threatened to expose classified operations that were critical to national security. Interests in the region. The captain faced a moment of truth about his role as a military officer and his responsibilities to both operational security and the personnel under his command. His investigation had revealed activities that were legitimate, but classified beyond his clearance level, creating a situation where his continued ignorance might be the best protection for everyone involved. Morrison made the difficult decision to end his investigation and report his findings through the proper classified channels. He recognized that his role was to support legitimate military operations rather than to satisfy his personal curiosity about activities that were deliberately concealed from him. The resolution of the situation brought both relief and new challenges for all involved. Morrison returned to his regular duties with a deeper understanding of the complex security environment in which modern military operations took place. Maria began her new role as a conscious participant in special operations support, bringing her technical expertise to bear on missions of critical importance. Williams continued his role as the coordinator of compartmentalized security operations, managing the delicate balance between operational security and personnel welfare that characterized successful classified programs. The incident had tested the integrity and professionalism of everyone involved, ultimately demonstrating that military values of duty, honor, and service could guide personnel through even the most complex ethical and security challenges. Forward Operating Base Thunder continued its mission with enhanced security and improved coordination between its various operational elements. The patch that had started the entire sequence of events remained on Maria's shoulder, but now it represented her conscious commitment to supporting operations that extended far beyond routine aircraft maintenance into the shadowy world of special operations where dedicated professionals work to protect national security interests around the globe.